In 2018, during archaeological excavations in Egypt, mysterious inscriptions were uncovered that appeared to belong to one of the most controversial pharaohs in history. These writings did not only describe political events, but also revealed the darkest secrets of the royal palace. In ancient Egypt, pharaohs were regarded as living representatives of the gods. For them, preserving bloodlines was seen as ensuring the continuation of divine power. This belief led some rulers to marry their own sisters, considering it a sacred tradition. Yet the pharaoh at the center of this story went far beyond tradition, becoming a figure whispered about in fear even among his own people. On the tablets discovered, the pharaoh's obsession with his sister was described in disturbing detail. Even the palace priests noted their unease with the corruption of such a relationship. But the pharaoh's power was so absolute that no one dared to confront him. During lavish feasts held in the dazzling halls of the Egyptian palace, the people could see the special affection he showed toward his sister, but fear kept them silent. One inscription translated by archaeologists read, "The gods command that our bloodline remain pure, and I am fulfilling this divine order." These words revealed the pharaoh's twisted reasoning. To him, this was not immorality but devotion to the will of the gods. Yet from today's perspective, this story stands as one of the most unsettling and shadowy chapters in the history of ancient Egypt. The newly decoded inscriptions revealed just how deep the pharaoh's obsession truly was. The texts described his belief that his sister was not merely a wife, but the living shadow of the gods on earth. To him, their marriage was no scandal, it was a divine command delivered to his people. On the walls of the temples, carvings showed them side by side, their crowns intertwined, as if they were not mortals at all, but beings touched by divinity itself. Inside the palace, however, this union sparked division. Some priests interpreted the pharaoh's words as a holy sign and quietly offered their support. Others considered it blasphemy, a desecration of the sacred order. In the dim corridors of the temples, whispers multiplied. Is the pharaoh disrupting the balance of the gods? Among the people, rumors spread even faster. In village squares and crowded markets, men and women spoke cautiously, afraid to voice their thoughts openly. Some insisted the pharaoh had shattered tradition for the sake of love, while others argued that he had corrupted the faith itself to hold on to his throne. The inscriptions also hinted at secret ceremonies along the banks of the Nile. These nocturnal rituals, lit only by flickering torches, were so exclusive that even the highest priests were forbidden to attend. According to fragments, the pharaoh and his sister renewed their vows again and again under the gaze of the gods, sealing their bond as eternal and unbreakable. Historians could never fully determine what took place during those nights. Some sources suggested little more than symbolic prayers, while others hinted at darker, forbidden rites. What remained undeniable was that the pharaoh had transformed his devotion into something far greater than love. It became both a political weapon and a spiritual proclamation of power. Even today, scholars continue to ask the same question. Was this ruler a man who risked everything for passion, or a sovereign who defiled sacred belief in order to maintain his grip on power? But the true shock comes when we learn the details of this forbidden relationship. Ancient sources and archaeological evidence reveal that Pharaoh not only shared his throne with his sister but also shared his bed. This was not merely symbolic, it was a physical relationship that produced heirs who would later rule Egypt as well. Why would a man, considered a god among mortals, commit such an act? The answer lies in the Egyptian belief system. For them, Pharaoh was not just a ruler but the living embodiment of the gods. And to preserve the divine essence, they believed the royal bloodline had to remain pure. In their eyes, the only person worthy of Pharaoh was someone who shared the same blood, his own sister. To us, it may sound shocking, disturbing, even perverse. But to them, it was a sacred duty. It was a way to keep the gods' power concentrated within the family, ensuring that no outsider could dilute the divine blood. This practice, though extremely controversial, was repeated by several pharaohs, including the infamous Ptolemies, centuries later. Yet, even in ancient Egypt, not everyone agreed with this idea. Many commoners found it strange and whispered about the pharaoh's choices. Some priests criticized it in secret, fearing that such unnatural unions would anger the gods rather than please them. However, as long as Pharaoh's word was law, no one dared to openly oppose him. This dangerous obsession with divine blood had devastating consequences. Children born from such unions often suffered from severe genetic disorders, physical deformities, and mental illnesses. One of the most famous examples is Tutankhamun, whose frail body still tells the tragic story of generations of inbreeding. So, while Pharaoh may have seen himself as protecting divine power, in reality, he was destroying the very strength of his dynasty. A line of kings, weakened by their own arrogance and obsession with purity, would one day collapse under the weight of its own corruption. And all of it began with a kiss on the forehead of his own sister, in the grand halls of a golden palace, where love, power, and taboo were hopelessly tangled together. The more we explore, the darker this story becomes. Inside the palaces of ancient Egypt, behind golden walls and towering statues of gods, secrets festered. The pharaoh, adored as a divine being, lived a life that blurred the line between holiness and sin. To the public, he was the protector of Maat, the sacred balance of the universe. But in his private chambers, he was a man consumed by desire, power, and obsession. Imagine the scene, a grand banquet in the palace. Musicians play their harps. Dancers move gracefully across marble floors. Priests chant prayers to the gods. And there, at the center of it all, sits the pharaoh, holding the hand of his sister, his queen. To the nobles and servants watching, this was a display of divine unity. But to us today, it looks like a disturbing spectacle of incest cloaked in ritual and tradition. Ancient writings and temple inscriptions often praised such unions, calling them the will of the gods. They described the pharaoh and his sister as the living embodiment of Osiris and Isis, a sacred couple whose bond symbolized eternal life. But beneath this mask of holiness, the truth was far more twisted. These rituals were not only political strategies, they were physical realities that shaped the fate of generations. Some historians argue that these marriages were never about love, they were about control. By marrying his sister, the pharaoh ensured that no foreign princess, no noble family, could ever challenge his throne. Power remained locked inside the palace, passed from sibling to sibling, from one cursed generation to the next. But what the pharaohs did not realize was that such power came at a terrible price. The gods they claimed to serve did not intervene to protect them. Instead, history shows us the tragic results: dynasties plagued by illness, kings dying young, and kingdoms weakened from within. And yet, for centuries, this cycle continued. One pharaoh after another repeated the same choice, convinced that they were preserving purity, when in fact they were planting the seeds of their own downfall. So the story of Egypt's most shocking pharaoh is not just about desire, it is about the dangerous illusion of absolute power, an illusion that blinded kings, corrupted palaces, and turned divine thrones into prisons of blood and madness. The final chapter of this story is one of silence, shadows, and the weight of history. Imagine the great halls of the Egyptian palace, once filled with music, laughter, and rituals. Now, they stand in eerie stillness, their walls whispering the secrets of a dynasty built on forbiddance, love, and unyielding power. The pharaoh who married his own sister believed he was immortalized by the gods. Statues carved in his image towered above the Nile. Inscriptions on temple walls praised him as a divine ruler chosen to bring balance to the world. But behind these monuments, the truth could not be hidden forever. Generations that followed were scarred by what he began. Historians point to fragile heirs, sudden deaths, and dynasties collapsing in chaos. What was once seen as divine purity slowly revealed itself as corruption of bloodlines, weakening the very foundations of the empire. The mighty throne of Egypt, which was meant to shine with eternal glory, instead became a cage of repeating mistakes. Even the people, once blinded by awe, began to see cracks in the illusion. Whispers spread through markets and temples, rumors of sickness, of curses, of rulers touched not by gods but by their own sins. And in those whispers, the power of the pharaoh was no longer absolute. As centuries passed, the story of the king who chose his sister over all others became a dark legend. It was retold not as a tale of holiness, but as a warning that when power becomes obsession, and when men believe themselves to be gods, destruction always follows. Look closely at the ruins of Egypt today, and you may still feel it. The shattered statues, the half-broken hieroglyphs, the empty tombs, all are echoes of a dynasty that sacrificed humanity for the illusion of divinity. So when we speak of Egypt's most twisted pharaoh, we are not only remembering one man's choices, we are remembering the cost of unchecked power, the danger of believing in myths created to hide sins, and the tragic reality that even the mightiest kings cannot escape the judgment of history. And in that silence, beneath the desert sands, his legacy remains not as a god, but as a cautionary tale of obsession, betrayal, and the dark side of absolute power.